What I choose to talk about today might challenge some people and might be welcomed by others, but I have always thought that raising passions is a worthwhile thing to do when we're talking about something as important as the lives of people with disability. Some people that are very important to me are people who have, since I've known them, been treated with suspicion, treated with mistrust. They've been misunderstood and sometimes even feared. And the other half of the people are people with disability. This is the essence of what I want to talk about today. Firstly, that the community respects the knowledge and expertise of those who work and live with people with disability. In other words, those people who might provide services to people with disability, those people who are family members, but in many ways are involved in the lives of people with disability. Secondly, the attitudes of people in the community are influenced and shaped by the people they perceive to be experts, what those experts say and do. And thirdly, this can often be a major problem for people with disability. For the past 10 years, I've worked as the coordinator of the Sunshine Coast Citizen Advocacy Program. And when I first started doing the work, I had a set of expectations about community attitudes. I felt sure that families were always motivated to act in what they felt were the best interests of a family member with a disability. I was confident that the most effective path for people with disability to greater independence and participation in community life came through the programs that were offered by service providers. But strongest of all was my belief, shared with other people, my colleagues and other people I worked with, that life for people with disability would just be so much better if the community were more tolerant and accepting. I agreed with those people who believed that the community need to be educated. They need to be educated, if necessary, legislated into a state of acceptance. Now, one of the things that I've talked to other citizen advocacy people about is that we really have a quite unique perspective. There are few people who work in disability who spend much of their time talking about the lives of people with disability, particularly those who are very vulnerable to abuse and neglect, exploitation, with people in the community who have never had any contact at all with people with disability or their families. We tend to be talking mainly to people that share a presence and an involvement in the disability world, and there are all those other people out there who don't. I found myself deeply involved with those people with a disability who are seldom, if ever, heard. Those who are unlikely ever to be present at a gathering like this. Those who are abandoned, rejected, isolated, neglected, and often, all too often, abused. I realised also that the nature of my work meant that I'd stepped outside the typical networks and relationships of service provider. As a citizen advocacy coordinator, I get to spend many hours talking to ordinary people. These discussions have been a revelation to me. I found that there is far more interest and understanding of the issues than we, meaning everyone, like to think. And what most impressed me was that people are confused. For as long as they can remember, it seems that they've been told how difficult it is to be with people with disability. It's so difficult that those who've got the training, the skills, the knowledge, the experience, the patience and the courage to work with people with disability must be something really special. Well, not only are they special, they're also experts. So why are people confused about this? Well, it's because those of us who are experts have been delivering some very confusing messages. Now, seemingly oblivious to the irony, we are telling the community that people who we say are difficult, dangerous, and burdensome to us should be valued, welcomed, and accepted by them. That some of us in the disability world have talked about how difficult, dangerous, and burdensome people with disability might be. But on the other hand, we expect all those people without training, without expertise, that they should be open and welcoming. Well, the main problem there is it's very confused, and it's not a very good way to sell an idea or get cooperation. The community is really challenging us here. we're being asked for an explanation about what we really mean. If we truly believe that people with disability should be valued and accepted by the community, why is there so much effort to talk them out of it? There is an enormous amount of effort into developing community programs. We have programs to link people with the community. And yet we know there is this endless dialogue designed to convince people in the community that you shouldn't have anything to do with people with disability. Well, at the very least, this is a total waste of money, apart from the incredible harm that it does to people with disability. So where does that burden talk come from and who benefits from it? It's surprising just how many people one meets who, while they don't have direct involvement with a person with a disability, are informed by the experiences of others who do have direct involvement. I once met a woman who told me with some enthusiasm that her son, who was a support worker in a large city in New South Wales, had recently been to Queensland on holiday and had brought with him his mobile phones that had photographs on them. And the images were of people with disability. They involved self-mutilation, public nudity, and other behaviours that he thought would shock the observers. What he was doing was bringing back evidence of how difficult his job was. In other words, he was someone that wanted to be both paid and patted on the back. Often, this sort of thing can be engaged in not by just individuals, but by organisations that want to accentuate the difficulty, the burden, the danger, and all those other things to maximise their opportunity for funding. What's really deeply distressing is a process by which caring, loving family members will feel forced to characterise a family member with a disability in extremely negative terms, in the belief that such a description will optimise the potential for securing funding. I cannot guess at the harm that this process does to private family relationships, but I've seen more than enough tears and heartache to know that this is often a source of much regret. What is happening when people with disability are described as burdensome, difficult, or even dangerous by those closest to them is that these labels are far more likely to be believed. Whatever the reason, whatever the benefit to be gained, there is a terrible price to be paid. And as usual, the people who pay the price are people with disability. A reputation thus constructed remains with the person with a disability forever. We all know every word that you say goes down in the files, and you can't get it out, and you can't take it back. The thing I'm most concerned about is those sorts of descriptions made for the purpose of getting funding can be used as justification for poor service practice, unnecessary restrictions, neglect, or even abuse. I have heard abuse justified to me on the basis that, but this person is dangerous. This person is a burden to their family. Who is it that builds the barriers? Well, it ain't built from the other side. They are unintentional consequences of those who are closest to people with disability. It is us that builds the barriers. What we've got to do is, in our pursuit of keeping people with disability safe, we have got to ensure that we don't construct these barriers which will prevent people from the community from doing what they need to do and developing relationships with people with disability. My own experience is that expectations that I had of a community which was motivated by mean-spirited self-interest were quite simply unfounded. I found instead an overwhelming belief that people with disability should be given a fair go. I found the community wanted adequate personal and material supports to be provided to people with disability. I found that many people were very interested in being involved with and assisting a person with a disability, but believed that such activity were the exclusive province of family members and professional experts. Some even expressed the view that legal restrictions, and they often cited duty of care, governed who could associate with, even voluntarily, people with disability. So where do those ideas come from? Those people who wish to have some personal voluntary interaction with people with disability generally find that the involvement is controlled and mediated by organisations. It's conditional on a process of application, approval, registration, training, coordination, management, appraisal, demands for loyalty to the organisation. In short, a comprehensive removal of any form of independent action and a drawing into the process of creeping professionalisation of every aspect of the lives of people with disability. I should make the point here that despite the overwhelming evidence to the contrary, many of those who are involved with the lives of people with disability continue to talk and act as though the community is full of exploiters, criminals, sexual predators who spend their lives waiting for an unguarded person with a disability. Now, I suppose it could be because people with disability are guarded so well that only the guards have the opportunity to indulge in the abuse and exploitation, which is a regular feature of too many people's lives. But I don't really think so. I think it might have more to do with the relentless and careless devaluing and dehumanising of people with disability by those who should know better. Nevertheless, it's often cited that the perceived threat from the community, which is what encourages measures such as congregating people together in large groups, where staff supervise rather than support and guard rather than guide. This is information available from the Australian government, and I'm sure it's a worldwide experience. Children are more likely to be abused by people they know than strangers. The number of children being abused and neglected is increasing. Disabled children are more likely to become victims of abuse than non-disabled children. So if you take the first and the last, disabled children are more likely to become victims of abuse from people they know than from strangers. This is a facility in Queensland, and it's important to me because I've come to know someone who used to live in this place and was one of the people caged. The problem that the operators of this place had was with the neighbours and people in the community. They were the ones that they had most difficulty in keeping this quiet from. And that says a lot to me, that we're talking about the important role that people in the community have in safeguarding people with disability and preventing this sort of thing going on. I was visited in my office by the man who did the inspections of the fire alarms in a place, who came to see me because he just could not believe what he witnessed at this place. And because he was just the man that was inspecting the fire alarms, people felt unconstrained and didn't change their behaviour. So he came to see me and said that, he had witnessed in the short time that he was there routine, systematic abuse and ridicule and harm that was being imposed on vulnerable people with disability. 4 of those people we saw before, and now they've got powerful advocates that speak on their behalf and protect their lives. We've always been quick to note the barriers which isolate people with disability from the communities they live in. We spend much time devising ways to overcome barriers, but we never seem to talk much about the motivations of those who willingly participate in constructing the barriers in the first place. I personally believe it's an unintended consequence of other things. The desire to protect a vulnerable child results sometimes in putting distance between that child and other people around who could step forward and be great assets in their lives. And sometimes it would take a great deal of courage and a preparedness for risk. Raising those barriers, keeping people away, is actually, the evidence is there that that's a far riskier process to take. The extent of tolerance, goodwill and acceptance in the community is often underestimated. I believe that the most powerful force for effective positive change in the culture of community acceptance and support for people with disability lies already in our hands. It starts with a simple recognition that those who are closely involved in the lives of people with disability are assumed to have expertise and credibility even if we do not seek, want or deserve it. We need to recognise also that the community takes its cue from listening and watching what we do. Each word we say about people with disability echoes in countless ears. Each action we take is witnessed by hundreds of eyes. The good news stories that are generated in public relations departments are no match at all to what people see going on in shopping centres in their own communities. Too often, people are acting without thinking instead of maybe standing back and looking at what's going on in a relationship and not being opportunistic. I found that rather than people with disability needing to be protected from an uncaring community, the community itself has an important role in safeguarding the lives of vulnerable people. It's critical that the community be more than simply accepting and welcoming to its members who have a disability. People with disability need the community to be interested in how things happen, to ask uncomfortable questions, to provide independent advocacy, and to demand that people with disability are treated with dignity and respect. The community can demand, when no one else does, that people actually do what they receive payment to do. The man with a disability, he likes to go to the pub. He doesn't drink that much. He actually helps the publican by picking up empty glasses. And recently he had someone working with him that was waiting for him to come home and got a bit upset because he was late. When he finally came home, the upset turned into rage, and this person who was paid to work with him, apparently they had a bit of a altercation. I think it was one way, and the man with the disability was knocked to the ground unconscious, and so badly that his head actually went through the gyprock wall in the hallway. Now, the next day, the whole town was buzzing with this is a small country town. And the advocate, immediately did what they needed to do. They went to the police and they reported it, and the organisation established an investigation. And of course, 6 weeks later, the police reported that they couldn't take it any further. And the organisation said that, they couldn't get any direct evidence, so they couldn't take it any further. But the result was actually that a week after this assault happened, the man that did it was long gone. Because this was a community where everyone in town knew this man. And the first question was, what's happened to him? And the second question was, who did it? And the third question was, where is he? He was a whole community whose consciousness about being a community that takes an interest in the welfare of a local person with a disability was raised to new heights. And never again will they ever have a situation where they just assume that the people, services and people that are paid to do this sort of stuff will do the right thing. They will be asking questions. I know that many people with disability are surrounded and supported by those who are genuinely motivated to do what's in the interest of those persons. I also need no one to remind me that there are those in the wider community whose fear, misunderstanding, and straight-out selfishness leads them to ignore, ridicule, or even harm vulnerable people with disability. As I've stated, I believe that the community learns by watching, listening, and by taking its cue from those who maintain that they are the experts. It's clear to me, for example, that governments listen very carefully to the voices which are loudest in their claim to represent the views of people with disability and their families. The loud voices now, we know too well, are people that are talking about other stuff, talking about building new institutions. So I guess we might just have to get loud again. We might need to accept that personally doing the right thing is just not enough. We might need to more actively challenge, debate, and argue with those who, in a short-sighted and short-term pursuit of funding and career opportunities, act to promote and maintain the perception that people with disability are burdensome, because by doing so, they contribute to making people with disability, wherever they are, however caring their families are, making them unwelcome in their own communities. put yourself in the shoes of a person for whom the only people they see in their life are people who are paid to be there. You know, there are many people with disability around like that. Now, some of those people that they will see are great. Some of them aren't so great. But there is a great heightened sense of vulnerability about living a life where the only people you see are there because they're paid. My message is that we need to avoid that situation where people are so isolated, the only people they see are people that are paid or maybe family members, but we need to make sure that there are opportunities for people in the community to also be involved in the lives of people with disability.